I didn't hesitate when Claire asked me for help. In fact, I didn't even think twice. She'd just left a marketing job that she'd worked so hard for. And now, freelancing as a graphic designer, she was struggling. The bills were piling up, her rent was due, and her credit cards were maxed out. She looked at me with those soft eyes, asking for a loan, and my gut told me to support her. We were a team, after all. She'd always been independent, but I knew freelancing wasn't easy. She was having a hard time landing steady work, and I understood. The last thing I wanted was for her to feel like she was sinking. So, I told her I'd cover the rent and help out with anything else until things got better. I didn't mind. I loved her. It was what partners did, right? We took care of each other. That's how I justified it. Felt like I was being generous, sure, but also doing the right thing. Some of my friends weren't so sure. They'd say things like, "Are you sure this is a good idea? You're not her bank account." But I'd brush it off. Claire wasn't the type to ask for help unless she really needed it, and I trusted her. She'd pay me back once her business picked up again. When she asked for $3,500 to cover some debts, she promised it was just a temporary setback. "The tax refund's coming in a couple of months," she said. "I'll pay you back, I swear." I didn't even blink before wiring her the money. It didn't feel like a risk. It felt like an investment in us, in her. Things would turn around, I told myself. And when they did, Claire would be the one paying me back. But for now, she needed me and I could handle that. The weeks dragged on after I sent the $3,500, and not once did Claire bring up repaying me. It wasn't like I was counting down the days, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She'd gotten her tax refund a week ago, and still nothing. I saw her out with her friends more often than I thought was normal for someone tight on money. They were at fancy restaurants, sipping cocktails in the kind of places I'd only ever seen on Instagram. Her social media posts showed her in new outfits, one after another. The kind of stuff she couldn't afford when I first met her. I didn't say anything at first, but I noticed. I noticed how she'd come home from dinner, bags in hand, smiling like everything was fine. And I kept thinking, isn't this supposed to be the time she's putting some money aside? So one night after she got home from yet another dinner out, I decided to ask her. Casual like, no big deal. I didn't want to make it awkward. "Hey, Claire, just checking in. When do you think you'll be able to pay me back?" I said, sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone like nothing was wrong. I wasn't trying to sound impatient, but it was getting hard not to. Her eyes flicked to me, and she paused for just a second too long. Then she went for the quick defense. "Things are still tight, Ethan. You know how it is. I'm not just freelancing, I'm trying to build a whole business here. It's a process." I nodded, even though the frustration was already creeping in. "Yeah, I get it. But you got your refund, right? I figured you'd be able to chip away at it now." She shifted, almost like she was getting uncomfortable. "Look, I'll pay you back, okay? It's just, can't right now. There are things I need to do, things I need to take care of." "Okay," I said, trying to sound calm, like it was no big deal. It was a big deal, though. I was starting to feel like a fool. Days passed, then weeks, and the silence was getting louder. I'd walk into the apartment after work, and there'd be new stuff around. Clothes, a brand new phone on the counter, some expensive-looking coffee maker. Meanwhile, I was covering every bill, scraping together my savings to keep up. The whole thing started to feel uneven, like I was the one holding us up while she was just floating. I tried to ignore it at first, thinking maybe I was overreacting. But it felt like she was taking advantage of me, like I was her personal safety net. And the more I thought about it, the more I felt used. She hadn't even asked how I was doing with everything. No, she was too busy posting pictures of her dinners out and her new purchases. I'd be lying if I said the thought didn't cross my mind. Maybe she just doesn't care. Maybe she didn't even plan on paying me back. But that wasn't Claire, right? She wouldn't do that. I wanted to believe that. Still, there was a gnawing doubt that wouldn't leave. I couldn't shake it, no matter how many times I told myself I was just being paranoid. Maybe I was just being too trusting. Maybe I had built her up to be this person who wouldn't hurt me, who wouldn't let me down. But now I wasn't so sure. I didn't want to think it, but I started wondering if I'd been blind all along. And the worst part? I couldn't figure out if I was madder at her or myself. I didn't mean to look through Claire's stuff. I wasn't the kind of person to snoop, but I needed to check the bills. We had a shared account for that, and the last thing I wanted was for something to slip through the cracks. So one night, while she was out with her friends, I opened her laptop, just to get a quick look. I should have stopped there, but I didn't. I scrolled through the usual work emails, receipts, stuff that meant nothing. Then, on a whim, I clicked open her messages. And there it was, a string of texts that went back for months. Messages from someone named James. At first, it seemed innocent enough, just a couple of emojis here and there, casual chatter. But the deeper I went, the more it hit me like a freight train. I miss you already. Can't wait to see you tonight. I'll make it up to you, promise. It's just hard being away from you. I love you, Claire. My heart dropped to my stomach. I felt the blood drain from my face, my hands going numb. I read through the whole thread, and it was clear. She'd been seeing this guy for months. Not just flirting, cheating. A whole other relationship, one I'd never even known about. I could barely breathe. I slammed the laptop shut and sat there in silence, trying to wrap my head around it. Couldn't believe it. It was like the ground had just disappeared beneath me. When Claire came home a few hours later, I didn't even give her a chance to settle in. I just blurted it out. Who's James? The words felt like they were choking me. Her face went pale. She froze. For a second, she didn't say anything. Then she let out a sigh, like she'd been holding her breath. Ethan, we need to talk. I stood up, my chest tight. Yeah, we do. What the hell is going on? She turned away, not looking me in the eye. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. She paused, like she was searching for words that wouldn't make her look like a monster. It just did. Our relationship was already falling apart. You didn't notice. I felt my stomach twist into a knot, and for a moment, I almost felt like I might throw up. You didn't notice? You've been lying to me for months, Claire. Months. I couldn't help the anger creeping in, but I wasn't yelling. Not yet. How could you do this? After everything. Her voice trembled. I didn't want to hurt you. I really didn't. But I don't know how to explain it. You don't need to explain, I snapped. You've been seeing someone else while I'm sitting here, covering your bills, waiting for you to pay me back. Do you even care about me at all? The question hung in the air, sharp and heavy, and for the first time, I felt like I didn't know the person sitting in front of me. She closed her eyes, like she was trying to hold it together. Ethan, I'm sorry, but I can't just erase everything that happened between us. I shook my head, my vision blurring with something that felt like a mix of anger and heartbreak. It's over, Claire. It's done. You can't just come back from this. And you will pay me back what you owe. I was calm, but the words felt like a punch. Claire's face hardened, and she crossed her arms. I can't pay you back right now. I can't. I stared at her, feeling the weight of the betrayal hit me in a way I wasn't ready for. The financial part of it felt insignificant now. It wasn't about the money. Not anymore. It was about the trust, the lie, everything we had been to each other. Fine, I said, my voice low. Then take your things and leave. She didn't even flinch. I'll go, but I still can't pay you back. I felt a coldness creep over me, a numbness that dulled the anger. I was done. I don't care anymore, Claire. Just go. She walked past me, her eyes avoiding mine, and grabbed her bag. As she left, I stayed rooted to the spot, watching the door swing shut behind her. And I realized then that what hurt the most wasn't her betrayal, wasn't the money she owed me. It was that I didn't even recognize her anymore. She wasn't the woman I thought I knew. And I didn't know if I'd ever find a way to trust anyone again. I was sitting in my living room, scrolling through emails when the knock at the door startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened it, there was a process server standing there, holding an envelope. Are you Ethan Harris? He asked. Yeah, that's me, I said, frowning, already feeling a knot in my stomach. He handed me the envelope without saying much, just a nod, and then left without another word. I stood there for a second, staring at the envelope, wondering what the hell it was. When I opened it, my heart stopped. The first words I saw made my chest tighten. Restraining order. I read through the papers in a daze. Claire had filed a restraining order against me, claiming that I'd been harassing her and threatening her over the money, that I'd been stalking her, showing up at her apartment, sending aggressive texts. The more I read, the more I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Felt like I was trapped in some sick joke. She was twisting everything. None of it was true. I hadn't been stalking her. I hadn't threatened her. Hell, I hadn't even raised my voice at her. We'd had one argument, and it was nothing compared to what she'd been doing to me for months. The whole thing made me sick, and my first impulse was to call Claire. I wanted to confront her, ask her what the hell was going on, how she could do this to me. I wanted to scream at her for making me the villain when she was the one who had been lying and cheating. But I stopped myself. I knew better than to break the order. I felt like I was drowning, like she had taken everything, my trust, my dignity, and now my peace of mind, and turned it into something that made me look like the bad guy. But I had to keep my head. If I violated the restraining order, I could get in serious trouble, and I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. Not after everything. So I did what I had to do. I called a lawyer. The lawyer was calm, collected. He walked me through the process, told me not to worry, that we'd fight this. But the advice he gave me, document everything, that stuck with me. I started making copies of everything. The texts, the bank statements showing the $3,500 I'd sent her. I even reached out to a few of my friends who had witnessed her behavior. Everyone I could think of who might have seen how she was manipulating me. People who'd been there when I talked about lending her money, who knew I was just trying to help her get back on her feet. It felt humiliating, like I was building a case against the person I thought I loved. But I had no choice. I couldn't just let her get away with this. I started keeping a detailed record of everything, even the smallest conversations I had with her friends or mutual acquaintances. I wrote down dates, times, what was said. I even took screenshots of texts where she'd promised to pay me back but never followed through. Every piece of evidence, no matter how small, went into a folder. Every time I had to look through the mess of it all, I felt the anger creep back in. But there was nothing I could do about it right now. I had to stay focused. It was the only thing that kept me grounded, the thought that eventually, the truth would come out. That she wouldn't get to rewrite the story and make me the bad guy in a narrative that didn't even fit. So I waited, and I gathered everything I could. Every email, every message. Every document that proved I wasn't the one who'd been in the wrong. And I prayed that someday, someone would see through her manipulation, just like I had. The days leading up to the hearing were the longest of my life. I spent every minute organizing my evidence, making sure everything was lined up perfectly. My lawyer had given me a clear strategy. Stay calm, stay focused on the facts. The truth would be on my side, and I couldn't let Claire's lies drag me off course. It wasn't easy. Every time I thought about the way she'd twisted everything, how she'd painted me as the aggressor, it felt like a punch to the gut. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but I knew I couldn't. Not yet. The only thing that mattered now was showing up prepared, staying level-headed. I blocked Claire on everything: text, social media, email, every form of communication. If she tried to contact me, I didn't want to risk messing up the legal process. I didn't want to give her any excuse to say I was harassing her again. The small claims suit I'd filed to recover the $3,500 was another weight on my chest. I couldn't believe it had come to this. I never thought I'd have to take someone I cared about to court over money. But after everything, I knew there was no other option. I was done being taken advantage of. My lawyer helped me put together the claim. We had the transfer receipts, the loan agreement, the texts where Claire had promised to pay me back. Everything was in black and white. Claire couldn't just walk away from this without facing consequences. But as the date for the restraining order hearing drew closer, I started to feel the anxiety creep in. The reality of it all was setting in. This wasn't just about me getting my money back anymore. This was about making sure Claire didn't get away with manipulating the system and turning my life into a nightmare. felt surreal, honestly. I kept thinking about how it had started. Us together building something. I never imagined I'd be standing in a courtroom, fighting for my integrity and my money against the person I thought I knew. I'd seen the way people in my life looked at me when I told them about the restraining order. They were supportive, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. The way they couldn't quite understand how it had all gone so wrong. And I hated it. I hated how Claire had made me look like the villain. But I couldn't focus on that now. All I could do was focus on the facts, on the truth, and get through this. I had no choice. I spent late nights going over everything, piecing it all together. The receipts, the text messages, the bank statements. I kept thinking, if I could just show the judge the truth, the whole story, Claire's version of events would fall apart. But I also knew it wouldn't be that simple. Nothing ever was. As the hearing approached, the pressure started to build. It was like I was walking through the motions of my life, but everything was wrong. I couldn't concentrate at work, couldn't shake the pit in my stomach. All I wanted was for the truth to come out. I wanted Claire to face the consequences of what she'd done. But the fear that the system could somehow fail me, the fear that Claire's manipulation would win out, stayed with me. I tried not to think about it too much. Couldn't. I had a plan and I was sticking to it. I would get through the hearing, get through the small claims suit, and get back to my life. Or at least try to. I just needed to hold on. I had no idea what to expect when I walked into the courthouse, but the moment I saw Claire, my stomach twisted. She looked like she had everything under control. Calm, collected, her lawyer beside her, ready to play the part of the victim. I'd never felt so out of place in my life. The judge called the hearing to order, and Claire's attorney went first. She stood up, smooth as glass, and started talking about how I'd been stalking Claire, that I'd been showing up at her place, making threats. Then she played the audio. It was from the one time I'd gone to Claire's to ask about the money. I'd barely raised my voice, wasn't angry, wasn't aggressive. But in the recording, I sounded like I was losing my shit. The way it was edited, it made me sound like a madman. Like I was shouting and demanding she pay me back immediately. I felt a wave of panic hit my chest, like the ground was slipping out from under me. But I stayed calm. I had to. My lawyer stood up right after the recording ended. He was sharp, precise, and he didn't let it go for a second. Your Honor, what you've just heard is an edited clip taken completely out of context. If we listen to the entire conversation, you'll see that Ethan was simply trying to discuss the loan. He was never aggressive. Claire's lawyer tried to object, but my lawyer was already pulling up the text messages. He laid them out. How Claire had promised to pay me back, how we had a loan agreement, everything. The loan was clear, documented. Claire had agreed to it. Does this sound like harassment to you, Your Honor? My lawyer asked, flipping through the evidence with a calm but deadly precision. The judge, a woman in her early 50s with sharp eyes, barely flinched. She turned her attention to Claire, who was sitting in her chair with her arms crossed, looking like she was bracing herself for battle. Ms. Thornton, the judge said, her voice firm, can you tell me if Mr. Harris made any physical threats towards you? Was there any indication he intended to harm you? Claire hesitated, just for a second. I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to find the right answer, the one that wouldn't come back to haunt her. No, she finally said, her voice soft, almost too soft. He never physically threatened me, but it felt like he was going to. I nearly choked on my own breath. That was the answer? It felt like? What was that supposed to mean? The judge raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. Felt like? She repeated, her tone not hiding her doubt. What does that mean? Did he ever actually touch you? Did he ever make any threats you felt could be a danger to you? No, Claire repeated, her eyes darting down to her hands, nervously twisting them in her lap. There was a pause, a heavy one, as the judge let that silence hang in the air. She glanced at both of us, and I swear, it was like she was weighing every word. The tension in the room was thick, like everyone was holding their breath, just waiting for the next move. Mr. Harris, the judge finally said, turning to me, did you, in fact, harass or threaten Miss Thornton in any way? I shook my head, my voice steady. No, Your Honor. I simply went to her house once to ask about the loan. I've been trying to get the money back for months. I haven't made any threats, physical or otherwise. Claire's lawyer looked like she wanted to argue, but the judge wasn't having it. After a long moment of silence, the judge spoke again, her voice measured. Based on the evidence presented, I find that there is insufficient proof to justify the restraining order. The request for a restraining order is denied. I felt like someone had lifted a weight off my chest. The relief hit me so hard I almost lost my breath. I'd been waiting for this moment for weeks, and to finally hear it, it was like waking up from a nightmare. But I knew the fight wasn't over. Claire stood up slowly, her face tight, like she wasn't sure how to handle the loss. Her attorney gathered the papers, but neither of them said a word to me. Claire didn't even look at me. She just turned and walked out of the courtroom like it was over. But it wasn't. Not for me. I'd won this battle, but Claire had still stolen something from me that I wasn't sure I could ever get back. Trust. Peace of mind. Hell, she still owed me $3,500. As I walked out of the courtroom, my lawyer gave me a nod, and I tried to smile, but it didn't feel real. I had won, but all I could think about was the next step. The small claims suit, the money, the closure I was still waiting for. This wasn't over. Not yet. But at least for now, I had a small victory. And that was something. The day of the small claims hearing arrived, and I wasn't sure what I was expecting. Maybe some sense of closure, maybe just the relief of finally getting it over with. But when I stepped into that courtroom, the weight of it hit me all over again. The tension was thick, the kind that made the air feel heavy. I was representing myself. But Claire? She showed up with a new lawyer. I didn't know whether to be pissed or impressed. Either way, it didn't matter, this was it. I had all the evidence I needed, and I wasn't backing down. The judge called the case, and we both stood up. Claire's lawyer went first, but it didn't take long before I could see the holes in their argument. They were trying to play it off like the money I gave Claire was just a gift. No formal agreement, no intention to repay. But I wasn't buying it, and I could tell the judge wasn't either. I started by laying out the facts. The loan agreement, the bank transfer for the $3,500, the text messages where Claire clearly promised to pay me back. I watched the judge's face as she flipped through the documents. There was no denying it. This was a loan, not a gift, not some act of charity. When it was Claire's turn to speak, she looked uncomfortable, like she wasn't used to being on the other side of the table. She tried to stick to her story, saying that the money wasn't really a loan, that I just offered to help her. No strings attached. But I could see the cracks in her story. I wasn't about to let her manipulate her way out of this. Ms. Thornton, the judge asked, cutting through the noise, why haven't you repaid Mr. Harris yet? Claire hesitated, the kind of pause that made me wonder how she could possibly explain herself. Her lawyer glanced at her, but she didn't seem to have an answer. Finally, she mumbled something about being financially strained and working on it. The judge didn't let her off that easy. Ms. Thornton, you received your tax refund several months ago. Why didn't you repay Mr. Harris then, if things are so tight? Claire shifted in her seat, clearly unprepared for the direct question. I just couldn't. I don't know, Your Honor, she stammered, her eyes darting around. Things have been complicated. There's a lot going on, and I haven't been able to focus on paying it back. I could feel my frustration building, but I kept it in check. I wasn't here to argue with her. I was here to lay the facts out, and I knew that was all that mattered now. Claire's lawyer tried to intervene, shifting the narrative to something more personal, claiming I was using the court system to control Claire, that I was trying to force her into repayment because I couldn't let go of the relationship. It was such a transparent attempt to paint me as some sort of obsessive ex, but the judge wasn't buying it. She turned to Claire, eyebrows raised. Is this about the money, or is this a personal dispute? I need you to answer clearly, Ms. Thornton. Did Mr. Harris harass you, or are we here to discuss a loan? Claire stumbled over her words, clearly unsure of how to answer. She was caught between the manipulation and the truth, and for the first time in a while, I could see the cracks in her mask. The judge's eyes narrowed, and she made her decision. Based on the evidence presented today, I find in favor of Mr. Harris. Ms. Thornton is ordered to repay the full amount of $3,500 plus court fees within 30 days. I didn't let myself smile, didn't let myself show too much relief, but inside, I was almost giddy. The truth had won out. I wasn't going to be stuck with this weight on my shoulders anymore. Claire's face was a mix of anger and disbelief. She didn't look at me as she gathered her things and left the courtroom, but I couldn't help the small, satisfied feeling that bubbled up inside me. I had done what I needed to do. The judge's ruling wasn't just about the money, it was about holding Claire accountable for what she'd done. She couldn't just walk away from this without consequences. And even though the process had dragged on far longer than it should have, I felt like I was finally getting some control back. But I knew this wasn't the end. There was still a long road ahead. Getting the money, dealing with the fallout, all of it. I wasn't naive enough to think it was over just because the judge ruled in my favor. But for the first time in months, I felt like the weight had shifted. I wasn't the one being manipulated anymore. I still had a long way to go, but this victory felt good. The ruling had been clear. Claire was supposed to pay me back. 30 days to give me the $3,500 plus court fees. But those 30 days came and went, and not once did I hear from her. Not a word. I waited. I thought maybe she was just dragging her feet. Maybe she'd finally get it together. But as the weeks passed, I watched her post more pictures from vacations, dinners out, shopping trips. Every time I saw her out there living her life, it made my stomach twist. She'd stolen from me. Stolen. And here she was, acting like it was all behind her. The money I'd lent her, the trust I'd given her was gone. And she was out there, acting like everything was fine. Meanwhile, I was stuck with my savings dwindling and her laughable excuses hanging in the air. Frustration was building, but I'd been patient. Too patient, I thought. I wasn't going to sit back anymore. I called my lawyer. When I explained that Claire still hadn't paid up, he didn't sound surprised. If she's not going to pay voluntarily, he said, we can start the process for garnishing her wages. I had no idea what that meant, but my lawyer explained it to me. Once the court issued a garnishment order, a portion of Claire's paycheck would be automatically taken out and sent to me until the debt was paid off. It was a process, but it was a process that would make her face the consequences of her actions. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to be the one taking her money like this. But she had no choice now. She'd refused to do the right thing, so this was the only way to get what was owed. The paperwork went through faster than I expected, and before I knew it, I had an order from the court. Claire's wages were about to be garnished, and I was going to start seeing a portion of her pay show up in my bank account. It felt like some sort of twisted justice. There was no victory dance in my head, no sense of satisfaction. It just felt necessary, like the thing I had to do to get what I was owed, what I deserved. The first payment came a month later. It was a small amount, less than $100, but it was something. It wasn't about the amount, really. It was the principle of it. Claire had no choice now. Her paycheck was getting siphoned off every month, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. I kept watching her social media, waiting for the day she'd address it. But she never did. She kept posting like everything was normal. Still out with her friends, still buying things, still acting like she was untouched by any of this. I wondered how she felt, watching her paycheck get chipped away every month. I couldn't imagine it was easy, knowing that her own actions had put her in this position. But that was her problem now. The debt was on her. The consequences were on her. Every time I got that direct deposit notification, I felt a small sting of relief. I hadn't been able to trust her to do the right thing, but at least the system was making sure I didn't get screwed in the end. And for the first time since all of this started, I felt like I was moving forward. Little by little, I was getting what I was owed, what I was owed. And Claire was watching it happen, unable to escape the consequences of her own doing. Months passed, and the garnishments kept coming. Each time, I felt the same tight knot in my chest, that strange mix of relief and bitterness. It wasn't fast, it wasn't what I wanted, but it was something. Little by little, Claire's paycheck got smaller, and my balance got larger. The money was being taken out of her hands, And every time I saw that deposit notification, I felt like I was finally getting some justice. Claire tried to avoid the consequences at every turn, acting like it didn't matter to her. She posted more vacation pictures, more nights out. But there was no escaping what was happening. Slowly, surely, her own earnings were being bled out. And I couldn't help but wonder what she thought when she saw that deduction on her paycheck every month. How long could she pretend it wasn't real? Then, one day, I got the notification the final payment had been made. The entire debt was paid off. I checked the account again, just to make sure. There it was in black and white. The balance was 0. For a second, I just sat there, staring at the screen. It was done. The last thread of the whole mess was finally, officially cut. I wasn't waiting for the next payment. I wasn't wondering if Claire would ever own up to it. It was over. I felt a strange calm wash over me, like the weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had finally lifted. It wasn't about the money anymore. It had never really been about the money. It was about standing up for myself, about not letting her walk all over me. It was about knowing I didn't let her get away with it. Looking back, I realized how easy it could have been to let my anger drive me. I could have let it consume me, let it shape everything I did. But I didn't. I kept calm. I stayed focused. I followed the process no matter how long it took. And now, finally, I had closure. Claire's attempts to control the narrative had failed. She tried to play the victim, tried to manipulate me and the system, but it didn't work. In the end, it had cost her, financially, emotionally, and reputationally. She wasn't the person I thought she was. And in the end, that was her consequence. She wasn't getting away with it. Not with me. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a long breath. There was no fanfare, no dramatic moment to mark the end of this chapter. But that was okay. The silence felt right. I wasn't looking for applause or validation. I was looking for peace, and I had it now. I could move on. It was finally over.